Ernest Borgnine didn't talk about the co-star who was terrible to him for 60 years. New and shocking information is coming out about what really happened on set, including angry outbursts, scenes that were ruined, and the coffee-throwing accident that hurt someone's second-degree burns. The most shocking discovery, though, wasn't just about work. It was very close to home. Today, the truth about the most dangerous feud in Hollywood is finally made public. Ernest Borgnine did not plan his way to Hollywood. He was born Hermes Ephron Borgnino in Hamden, Connecticut in 1917. His parents came to the United States from Italy to find the American dream. But his life took a strange turn before he could even remember where he was born. His parents split up. His mom took him to Italy, and he learned about a lot of new things there for the next 5 years. He lived in Carpi, which is close to Medina. He spoke only Italian and became so immersed in the society that it seemed like he was born there. Then things changed again in 1923. His parents got along again, and the family moved back to the United States. It wasn't just about moving back home. It was about beginning over. His dad changed his name from Camillo to Charles. The family name was changed from Borgnino to Borgnine to sound more American and fit in. Because Ernest was young, this change in who he was just the first of many that would shape his future. Borgnine didn't want to be an actor when he was growing up in New Haven, Connecticut. He wasn't the kid who wanted to be in Hollywood, to sneak into movie houses and watch movies. He was focused on sports and liked being active and competing. His high school yearbook didn't say anything about theater or acting. There was no reason to think he would ever be in front of camera at that point. But fate had something else in mind, and it began with the U.S. Navy. He joined the Army right after high school in 1935. He worked as a ship officer on the USS Lamberton for 6 years. He was ready to move on by 1941 and got an honorable release. But Japan attacked Pearl Harbor only 2 months after that. He couldn't stand by and let his country go to war. In January 1942, he re-enlisted and this time served on the USS Sylph, a patrol boat whose job it was to protect the Atlantic coast. The war changed him. It made him tougher. Being in the military taught him discipline and how to work with others, which affected how he played military roles in movies. He had worked his way up to the rank of gunner's mate first class and won many military awards by the time he was released in 1945. He almost made a living in the Navy. He really thought about joining again for another 10 years. Movie stars would not have known his name if he had. Then his mom said something that made him think. She told him he was too pushy and that he should try acting. Everything changed because of that one idea. At first, becoming an actor seemed like an odd choice. He had never done it before, didn't know anyone, and didn't know where to begin. He didn't let that stop him, though. He signed up to go to the Hartford Randall School of Drama. After that, he went to Virginia and joined the Barter Theater. This wasn't a great start. During the Great Depression, a simple but unique idea led to the start of the Barter Theater. People could give food in exchange for passes. That meant that artists were often paid in vegetables instead of cash. Borgnine didn't care. He played any part he could find and performed night after night. He painted sets when he wasn't on stage, putting together outfits, and even cleaning toilets. During a show one night, he had to chase a live chicken across the stage. The bird flew into the crowd and started clapping wildly while people laughed and screamed. It was a mess, but he learned something from it. He learned how to make up things on the spot, interact with the crowd, and make a disaster into a show. He also worked with people who would become stars, like Gregory Peck and Patricia Neal, who were there to learn and watch. Then his big moment came. He got a part in The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. He believed he was awful. The crowd didn't agree. People started to pay attention all of a sudden after the show went well. It was 1949, and he was on Broadway. His first part was in Harvey, a long-running play with James Stewart as the lead. But it wasn't easy to get there. The people who do casting didn't know what to do with him. He couldn't make his face mean or funny at the same time. Harvey showed them they were wrong when they said they couldn't figure out where he fit. Borgnine found his place on stage by watching Stewart do everything as a male nurse. He even kept a notebook where he wrote down notes and watched Stewart deliver lines to learn the craft in real time. It was stable for him because the play ran for 1,775 shows. After that, TV called me. In 1951, he made his TV start as a bad guy in Captain Video and his Video Rangers, a low-budget sci-fi show. Even though it wasn't a big part, it made him known. He got a small part in the movie The Whistle at Eaton Falls from Columbia Pictures because they liked him. It wasn't much, but it was something. From Here to Eternity, which came out in 1953, was his big break in movies. His first job was in the U.S. Navy for 10 years. Being in the military made him a natural for military roles, but nothing could have prepared him for the part of Sergeant Fatso Judson. A very different person from the real Borgnine, who was known for being kind, played the part. Angelo Maggio, played by Frank Sinatra, was beaten to death with a nightstick in the most frightening scene of the movie. It was terrible, shocking, and too painful to watch. Sinatra had doubts about Borgnine's ability to play such a scary part, but those doubts went away when the movie began. Borgnine really got into the role of the character. He shut himself away for days to get his mind right. He changed into someone else. Because his act was so good, Sinatra wouldn't talk to him off camera for weeks. Even people on the crew avoided him. It wasn't just his co-stars who were affected by how major the part was. He thought about it a lot after shooting was over. He later said that for months, the scene kept coming back to him in his dreams. Even stronger reactions came from the crowds. Some people were so upset by what he did that they sent him death threats. Unable to tell the difference between the actor and the role. He was hurt by the part, but it made him famous. After 2 years, he shocked Hollywood once more. He wasn't playing a bad guy this time. He played a normal butcher looking for love in Marty. Fatso Judson couldn't have been more different. The movie itself was a risk. It was made with only $343,000 in funds. A huge sum of money for a movie that would win Best Picture. But Marty got people to care about him in a way that no one saw coming. The 1955 Academy Awards gave Borgnine the award for Best Actor. He was 38 years old, which made him one of the oldest actors to win for a first lead part. What's even stranger is that he beat out stars like James Dean and Spencer Tracy. His speech of thanks was short and sweet. Because his mother pushed him to become an actress, he thanked her. But the truth was that he almost never got the part in the first place. At first, director Delbert Mann wanted Rod Steiger, who had played Marty in a TV version. At first, Borgnine wasn't even thought of. That changed when they met by chance at a party in Hollywood. The makers liked him so much that they chose to give him a screen test. Mann later said that Ernest Borgnine didn't play Marty because his performance was so real. His name was Marty. That part didn't just change his job. Movies didn't need big stars or big budgets to get people to watch them. It changed Hollywood. Borgnine never put himself in a certain place. In 1967, when he was 50 years old, he played General Wardens in the movie The Dirty Dozen, which became a huge hit. He was determined to perform all of his own stunts, even the risky one where he jumped from a moving train. His younger co-stars, like Lee Marvin and Charles Bronson, were amazed at how long he could act. After 2 years, he shocked people again with The Wild Bunch, which is one of the bloodiest westerns ever made. His character, Dutch Angstrom, was cruel but also kind of likable. There was one scene that stood out. He laughed like crazy while killing dozens of guys. He couldn't get over that moment for years. Ernest Borgnine, on the other hand, had a surprising path to fame on TV. With McHale's Navy, he got his big break in TV. He became well-known thanks to the 4-season show. Borgnine played Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale, an easygoing officer who was in charge of a group of poor fit people. It wasn't at all like the serious roles he had played before. A lot of people didn't know this, but his act was based on real events. He had been in the Navy during World War II and spent many years on the USS Sylph. That made him feel good about the part, even when the show was being silly. However, McHale's Navy wasn't all fun and games. Borgnine had a very bad accident on set during the 2nd season. His face and hands were burned when an explosive device went off too soon. He had to take 3 weeks off from filming while he healed. He was more dedicated than ever when he got back. He was nominated for an Emmy that same year for the part. Even real military actions were changed in a way that no one expected. A secret note from 1965 showed that the U.S. Navy had talked to the show's writers. Some government leaders thought McHale's creative ways of solving problems could be useful in real life. Operation McHale, a set of Navy training drills based on the show, was the result. Information about those drills is still secret, but it's hard to believe that a sitcom had an effect on military policy. Borgnine's TV success kept shifting in ways that no one saw coming. His first part was as Dominic Santini in Airwolf, a fast-paced action show about a helicopter from the future in 1984. He was 67 years old at the time, but he wouldn't slow down. He did a lot of his own tricks. In 1985, he almost died because of that choice. An airplane went out of control while recording and crashed only a few feet away from him. He was lucky that his responses were quick because he only got very slightly hurt. Then he got a part that made him famous to a whole new age. SpongeBob SquarePants has a mermaid man. His grandson, who loved the show, was the start of it all. He kept hearing the boy tell him to be on it. In 1998, Borgnine talked about this at a charity event. Someone from Nickelodeon was there and asked him to read a few lines right then. He gave the act that got him the job, even though he only had a napkin as a script. Mermaid Man was a fan favorite and was in 17 shows over the course of 13 years. The people who made the show even made small references to Borgnine's time in the Navy in the characters' lines. His last recording session took place just 2 weeks before he died in 2012. He was still working at age 95, which made him one of the oldest voice artists still working at the time. Before he became famous on TV, Borgnine didn't want anything to do with it. In 1956, right after winning an Oscar for Marty, he was offered the lead part in The Real McCoys. He said to the reporters, "TV is a fad," and turned it down. It won't last. Most movie stars thought of TV back then as a step down. In 1961, they changed their minds. He met a young boy with a terminal sickness at a charity event. The kid told him that it made him happy to watch his movies in the hospital. That moment was very hard on Borgnine. Suddenly, he understood that TV wasn't just for fun. Movies couldn't reach as many people as this could. When he chose to work in TV, The Real McCoys, with Walter Brennan as the lead, was already a big hit. Borgnine learned a lesson from being turned down. A few months later, when McHale's Navy came out, he jumped at the chance. After many years, he realized that he was wrong about TV. He told the press, "I was a fool to think TV was beneath me. It's not about how big the screen is. It has to do with how big the audience's heart is." Ernest Borgnine had a life full of acts that people will never forget, and his love life was just as exciting. He was married 5 times in 95 years. Some marriages ended in tragedy, others in scandal, and one in love that will last forever. Rhoda Kimmons was his first wife before he became famous. They got married in 1949 and had a daughter named Nancy in 1952. They made a life together for almost 10 years. Things changed, though, because of Hollywood. Their marriage ended when Borgnine's career took off. It was over by 1958. Katie Jurado, a Mexican actor known for being fiery on and off screen, was the start of the next part of his love life. They got married in 1959, but things were never calm between them. Their fights were in the news, and their anger often turned into fights in public. They had enough by 1963. Another broken marriage, another lesson learned. Then came the shortest and most memorable one. Borgnine married Broadway star Ethel Merman in 1964. They were together for a little more than a month. It looked like a Hollywood fairy tale at first. After getting married in June, they went on a trip to Japan. As planned, the trip did not go as planned and turned into a disaster. Fans followed Borgnine everywhere they went. Merman, who was used to being the center of attention, felt overlooked. Every day that went by, the stress got worse. Things went off in Tokyo. Later, people who were there said they heard a heated fight reverberating through the hotel halls. After the trip was over, Merman was ready to give up. She threw a diamond and pearl ring into a koi pond because she was mad. It was less than 5 weeks after they said "I do" that she filed for divorce. She never talked about the marriage again. She didn't say anything. Her quiet spoke for itself. She wrote an autobiography that came out in 1978. My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine was the name of one chapter. People who turned the page were looking for a story. They only found a blank page instead. A sentence that said everything with no words at all. Borgnine afterwards said that it did hurt a lot. In an interview, he said, "That blank page told me more than anything she could have written. I'll never forget getting hit in the face." After that terrible event, Borgnine got married to Donna Rancourt in 1965. The names of their children were Diana, Christopher, and Sharon. The marriage in this case continued longer than the others. But by 1972, it was over and they were divorced. He finally found the right person. The two met at a party in Las Vegas in 1972. Tove Trains was a Norwegian businessman. She wasn't sure at first because she knew what people said about him. but Borgnine's charm won her over. When they got married in 1973, he felt really stable for the first time. Tove was more than just his wife. In every way, she was his partner. She built a beauty business that did well, and Borgnine became her biggest fan. He even made fun of the fact that he was the world's oldest living Avon lady because he had been in her ads. They were together for almost 40 years, which is longer than all of his past marriages put together. Borgnine often said that Tove was what kept him going in the last few years of his life. He said, "I'm 95 years old and I'm still going strong," in his last interview, which was just a few weeks before he died. "I believe it's because I love Tove." She died with him on July 8th, 2012, and she held his hand. He had finally found love that would last after years of looking. Ernest Borgnine and Shelley Winters, on the other hand, were both stars with strong personalities. That meant it wasn't easy for them to be together on the Pono trip. In the disaster movie from 1972, a group of people were trying to stay alive after their ship sank. Snow played a tough agent, and Borgnine played his resolute wife. The way they worked together was tense behind the scenes, even though their acts were intense. Winters was known for being very strict. She thought it was important to really know her characters, and she often pushed for changes to be made to the plot. She showed up to work one day with a 20-page script that told the story of her character's past. She insisted on changing lines to make them fit her idea, but the author wouldn't agree, and Borgnine was stuck in the middle. He later said that it was hard to work with Winters because she wanted to be in charge of everything. The hardest part was a scene that took place underwater. The safety team was worried about Winters' stunts, but she kept on doing them herself. Her goal was to show that at age 51, she could still swim like a pro. It was a terrible 14-hour day for what should have been a quick shoot. The director watched the scene 65 times before he was happy with it. Everyone, including Borgnine, was annoyed by the long hours, but he kept his cool. He said it was one of the worst days of his work later on. Even though she had trouble, Winters' act was unforgettable. She worked hard, and it paid off when she was nominated for an Academy Award. Even though he was angry at the time, Borgnine eventually agreed that Winters' gut feelings were often right. Years after the movie came out, he said she was a force of nature, hard to control, unpredictable, and undeniably skilled. He thought it was both an honor and a challenge to work with her. In the end, the fights they had on set made their act stronger. Ernest Borgnine had also always had a lot of respect for Spencer Tracy. Things were very different when I worked with him on Bad Day at Black Rock in 1955. There was more going on than just respect. There was fear. The movie was shot in Lone Pine, California, beginning on July 12, 1954. It was very hot, more than 100 degrees, and very uncomfortable. Borgnine didn't even notice, though. He was too worried about being on screen with one of the best players in Hollywood. Tracy was 54 years old. He had won 2 Academy Awards and was known for taking a straightforward approach to acting. Borgnine was still setting himself up at age 37. That difference in age hung over every scene they were in together. Tracy used to throw off his co-stars on purpose. He didn't just remember lines. It was hard to tell what was scripted and what wasn't because he changed them, added to them, and said them with such confidence. That was strange for Borgnine. During a tense scene one day, Tracy said something that no one saw coming. Borgnine stopped moving. The scene was real, and that take was used in the end. John Sturges, the director, liked to shoot in long takes with no breaks. Like Tracy, that wasn't a problem for him. That person, Borgnine, had a terrible time. He messed up his lines 7 times in a row during an important scene on August 17th. Every time Tracy made a mistake, her anger was more clear. By the second, Borgnine felt lower and lower. Their performances showed how tense things were between them. A bad guy named Coley Trimble was played by Borgnine. He played a man named John J. McCready who didn't give up. Even though their scenes together were important, the fight in the town's diner was even more so. This fight, which took place on August 23rd, became one of the most memorable parts of the movie. As a survivor of the war with only one arm, I had to use pure skill to beat Borgnine's character. Borgnine was bigger in real life. He was about 210 pounds and 5 feet 9 inches tall. Tracy was about 10 inches bigger than the other girl, but she was only 160 pounds, which is a lot less. The scene was even more powerful because of how different they looked. It took 14 tries to get it right. Things became too real. Borgnine hit Tracy in the jaw with a hard punch by accident. The set stopped making noise. After a short pause, Tracy brushed it off as if it were nothing. Even though Borgnine was already tense, he felt even more so now. He did a lot of wrong. Things kept getting worse. Then there was the moment that Borgnine will never forget. Tracy said the line while looking him down. "Not only are you wrong, you're wrong loud and clear." He said it in a way that made it sound like he was talking to Borgnine himself, not just the character. In the last part of the fight, Tracy used a single-arm judo throw to flip Borgnine over onto a table. There were no action doubles, just two tired actors giving it their all. The very last take was taken at 4:17 p.m. The anger, the sweat, and the tiredness made the scene feel real and raw. No matter what, that fight made things different between them. During the shoot, Tracy had been nervous around Borgnine the whole time. All of a sudden, she felt respect for him. Soon after, he suggested Borgnine for the part that won him an Oscar in Marty, 1955. After that, when Ernest Borgnine joined Johnny Guitar in 1954, he thought it would be a normal film shoot. Instead, he got caught in the middle of one of the most dangerous fights in Hollywood history. They were at war with each other, not just because they didn't like each other. When Crawford found out that McCambridge's husband, Fletcher Markle, had been seeing someone else, things started to go badly. That piece of history was enough to make her angry. From then on, she made things very hard for McCambridge. One day, Borgnine saw Crawford storm onto the set, grab McCambridge's outfits, and throw them off the highway. They had to be quickly gathered by the crew before they got lost in the Arizona desert. Borgnine tried to concentrate on his work, but the stress made it hard. McCambridge and Crawford wouldn't be in the same room. Because their scenes had to be shot at different times, director Nicholas Ray had to put them all together afterward. It was already annoying, but things got worse. Crawford and McCambridge lost control on September 3rd when things were really hot. They switched from yelling to hitting. Sterling Hayden and Borgnine had to step in and separate them. It was a mess. Borgnine later said it was the most inappropriate thing he had ever seen. Crawford never turned on Borgnine, even after all of this. He got along with her, but he saw that she could lose her cool at any time. She threw a hot cup of coffee at a young production helper one day after a bad take. The poor guy got second-degree burns. That was a moment Borgnine will never forget. Years later, he said that Joan was like a time bomb that was about to go off. You could never tell what would make her mad. The other time, he walked in on her yelling at a costume designer by chance. Her voice was rough. Her eyes were crazy. Borgnine didn't say anything. He quickly left the room before she could get mad at him. Crawford wasn't totally mad, though. On the last day of filming, she gave the team personalized Pepsi bottles as a surprise. She did this to show her appreciation for her husband, who was CEO of Pepsi-Cola. But that small act of kindness couldn't make things better. She had one last fight with McCambridge before she left. She told her very clearly that she would hurt her job. When Borgnine thought about what had happened years later, he was both amazed and shocked. It was like walking on eggshells while handling dynamite when I worked with Joan. He said, "She was smart, but she was really scary."